Wait, brother-in-law, what is this? It's too enormous. 42 years of my life I always shrunk whenever I stood before a woman. But as I faced my first experience at last, my whole body was frozen like stone with tension, as if my heart might burst at any moment. But the person lying in front of me happened to be my sister-in-law. True to being a Pilates instructor, her taut and provocative body, without a single ounce of fat, caressed my thigh stealthily, and she breathed hot, heavy whispers into my ear. 42-year-old bachelor Park Sung-ho, who had to live his whole life like a eunuch, treated like a monster by women because it was just too much larger than others. Why on earth did I end up spending my first night ever with my wife's older sister and not my modest wife? From now on, I will tell you a heartrending and unconventional story that completely upends your common sense and has a conclusion you could never predict. Before we really begin, please make sure to click the subscribe and like buttons at the bottom right of the video. It's all free. How do you do? My name is Park Sung-woo. I am 42 this year. Others call this age the prime of life, unshakable by worldly temptations, but I am a man who has lived a life of holding my breath, swayed only by my own body. On the surface, I look perfectly fine, even decent. Standing over 180 centimeters with an athletic build and the title of team leader at a self-sufficiency support center, I have nothing to be ashamed of anywhere I go. The neighbors click their tongues at me, asking Team Leader Park, what are you lacking that you're still alone? Are your standards too high? They say things like that, but every time they do, my insides turn into lumps of charcoal. I have one physical secret that I have never been able to tell anyone, not even my parents. It's closer to a curse than a secret. It's that it of mine is abnormally, truly ridiculously, gigantic compared to others. While this might be a badge of honor for some men, for me it has been a shackle that followed me all my life and choked my neck. My first memory was a trip with the first girlfriend I met after being discharged from the military at 22. At the moment, I tried to embrace her with my heart pounding, like it was going to burst. What filled her eyes when she turned on the light was not love, but shock and terror. Honey, this isn't right. This isn't human. Please get that away. She screamed and ran out of the hotel room, crying without even managing to gather her clothes properly. Back then, I just thought she was being overly dramatic. However, the women I met after that all had the exact same reaction. It's like a monster. It's disgusting. How could such a thing exist in this world? Those words flying like daggers from lips that used to whisper love turned my self-esteem into rags. As I passed 30, I realized that my body is not a source of pleasure for women, but a form of violence and fear. For over 10 years after that, I lived thinking of myself as impotent. Instead of feeling excitement when seeing a woman, I felt a fear that she would run away again, so I completely erased the word dating from my life. Every night as I drank soju alone, I consoled myself by saying it's better to be alone, but the loneliness that washed over me at times would chill me to the bone. It was my mother who, unable to watch me like that, would plunge a knife into my back. Seung-ho, my only wish before I close my eyes is to see you start a family. You aren't lacking in any way, so why are you like this? My mother was well known among the deacons at her church. She acted as if my inability to get married was her own sin. Every day, she went to dawn prayers and wailed, begging for a spouse to be fated for me. My mother's matchmaking offensive became increasingly persistent. This time is truly different. She's a modest and lovely teacher. Her age is just right, too. Usually I would have wanted to curse, but that day, my mother's hunched back and gaunt knuckles struck a chord in my heart. Fine, it probably won't work out this time either. But since it's my mother's last wish, I'll just go see her face. With that mix of resignation, I went to the blind date. That is where I met Lee Soo-jin. A white blouse and a neat skirt and intelligent eyes, visible behind her glasses. She taught math at a high school and was different from the women I had met before. Her voice was calm and her way of speaking was refined. But during our conversation, one thing she said shook my deeply frozen heart. "Seong-ho, your eyes are very deep. I feel an inexplicable loneliness, so my heart keeps going toward you." At that moment, my heart sank. Because she was the first woman to see me as a lonely man rather than the monster I had been treated as my entire life. A crazy hope began to sprout that perhaps this woman, someone so decent and deep-hearted, might even embrace my secret. Everyone, 42 is not a young age, is it? I have been through all sorts of trials in life and should have been indifferent to most things, but the day I first met Soo-jin, I felt dazed as if I had been hit on the head. The moment I saw her sitting by the window in the cafe, pushed there by my mother's pestering, I caught my breath as she read a book. 37-year-old Lee Soo-jin sitting there in a neat navy dress, with a white cardigan, her face clear and bare of makeup. From the very air around her, she was different from the flashy women I had met before. She felt like a clear spring, or perhaps a calm forest. She taught math to kids at a high school, and even her voice was refined. "Hello, Mr. Park Sung-ho. I've heard so much about you from your mother. She said you are a very sincere and warm-hearted person." At those words, I felt the fragments of inferiority deep in my heart melt away like snow. I stared at her, dazed to the point where I couldn't even remember what I had said in response. Oh, if it's a woman like her, someone so modest and profound, wouldn't she understand the burden I've carried all my life? Heavy. Such naive expectations filled my head. As I kept seeing Soo-jin, I became completely addicted to her conservative and modest demeanor. She didn't even drink, and she was the epitome of a disciplined life, always heading home by 9 p.m. It was a rare kind of modesty in this day and age. Sung-ho, I work in education, so I really dislike it when the order of my life is disrupted. I feel at ease because you seem like a solid person, just like me. The word order, as she said it, sounded like salvation to me. In fact, the women I'd met before always prioritized excitement, glamour, and physical chemistry. But Soo-jin was different. She loved walking quietly in the park together, and she would beam with joy like a child over a book of poetry I gave her. Seeing her cautious attitude, where she was hesitant to even let our fingers brush, I felt for the first time an intense desire to grow old with this woman. I wondered if these feelings were possible for us, but love knows no age. After work, I would buy her favorite baby's breath and pick her up at school, and on weekends we would visit quiet, secluded temples across the country. She responded to my kindness with a bright smile, and that laughter became the only lamp illuminating my dark life. And what about my mother? Sung-ho, a modest bride like Soo-jin, is a blessing sent from heaven. Don't ever let her go. This time please grant your mother's wish. With my mother's desperate tears and Sujin's noble charm combined, my heart was already at the wedding hall. Yes. I'll just tell her about my physical secret later once we've built more trust. If it's Sujin, someone who cares for me this much, she will eventually accept me. But everyone, in a corner of my heart, there was still a sharp thorn stuck. Because she was such a pure and conservative person, I couldn't even fathom how great a shock my true secret would be to her. On the other hand, I felt infinitely cowardly for being relieved that her conservative nature meant she wouldn't discover it before marriage. Sujin, I love that upright conviction of yours. If we could spend our lives together, I would have nothing more to wish for. Upon my sincere confession, Sujin shyly nodded and gently took my hand. That warmth resonated deep within my heart. That night, I returned home and stared at my body reflected in the mirror, lost in complex thoughts. Could this massive curse ever be turned into a blessing? Or would it become the spark that leads even this love to ruin? In the end, I could not bring myself to speak of my secret. No, I could not bring myself to say it. I simply hid my fear behind her bright smile and, for the first time in my life, began to dream of building a home. 42. It felt like a warm spring day was finally arriving in the life of Park Seong-ho, the aging bachelor. Everything seemed to be flowing smoothly like that. Even just when our families met and the wedding date was set, I thought I was the luckiest man in the world. But I never dreamed that behind the true self Sujin insisted on, a massive unforeseen barrier was waiting for me. And that barrier was returning not as a fence to protect me, but as a noose tightening around my neck. One day, with the wedding just around the corner, Sujin called me out and spoke with a very firm expression. I should have known then just how much that single condition, she said, would twist my life in such an astonishing direction. Everyone is preparing for a wedding, originally this nerve-wracking. Even during the joyous times of booking the venue and moving in furniture, my heart felt like it was walking on thin ice every single day. What if Sujin notices the truth about my body? What if we get carried away by the atmosphere, cross the line, and she screams and runs away? I imagine tens of thousands of things every night staring at the ceiling. However, my worries were nothing more than groundless fears. Because Sujin was much more stubborn than I had imagined, and perhaps even a woman, bordering on terrifyingly fastidious. It was one night exactly 2 months before the wedding. We were finishing our date in the car and about to part ways, when the atmosphere turned strange. It was when I carefully wrapped my arms around her shoulders and brought my face close to hers. Sujin pushed my hand away gently, but very firmly. Seong-ho, I told you before, didn't I? I made a promise before God that I want to keep my body pure until marriage. Her gaze was unwavering, that obsessive insistence on premarital purity bordering on religious conviction. Most men would have probably gotten annoyed, calling it old-fashioned nonsense in this day and age. But everyone, how do you think I felt? To be honest, the moment I heard that, I almost burst into laughter because of the relief that surged from deep within my chest. Yes, that's a relief. Such a relief. I cheered inwardly. Her germophobic convictions served as the safest shield for me. Doesn't it mean I won't have to show or be caught with my monstrous true nature until the wedding day? Cowardly, I squeezed her hand and played the part. Sujin, I respect your noble convictions. I will protect you until the end as much as I cherish you. At my words, Sujin teared up, seemingly touched. Little did she know how devious and cowardly my thoughts really were. Sujin wasn't just conservative about sexual matters. Her germophobia permeated every part of her daily life. She always carried hand sanitizer on our dates, and even a single hair on my clothes would make her expression stiffen, strangely. Xiangho, it's good to be clean, isn't it? Disorder feels like a sin. She acted like a pure white angel, despising everything dirty in this world. Watching her, I sometimes had an eerie premonition. If a woman who loves cleanliness this much sees my rough, massive body, how would she react? But I struggled to ignore that anxiety. Once we're married, once she's legally my wife, things will work out somehow. As we grow fond of each other and are bound as husband and wife, she will eventually adapt. With such complacent thoughts, I numbed my conscience. My mother was all smiles seeing that side of Sujin. How is my daughter-in-law so modesty? Unlike kids these days, she has such strict morals. She's truly a blessing. The more my mother praised her, the greater the guilt in the corner of my heart grew. But I felt like I had boarded a train that couldn't stop. We picked out gifts and decorated our new home, acting out the role of a perfect couple to be. I washed my hands more often to match her germophobia, and played the part of a chaste knight exactly as she wanted. People looked at us and said we were such a well-matched pair. They didn't hold back their praise, asking how we could be such a gentle, refined couple. But those compliments sounded like the word fraud in my ears. Finally, the wedding day dawned. Dressed in a white wedding gown, Sujin looked more dazzling and noble than anyone else in the world. As the choir's hymns rang out and the pastor continued his sermon, I kept repeating to myself, just get through today. If I can just get through tonight safely, everything will be fine. Amidst the applause and blessings filling the hall, we became a married couple. Sujin smiled happily and held my arm tight, and as I felt her warmth, I was intoxicated with a sense of victory. I mistook that moment for my liberation from the inferiority complex that had haunted me my whole life. But everyone, that wasn't liberation. It was the threshold to a deeper hell. After the ceremony at our honeymoon resort in Sokcho, Gangwon-do, in that fancy room with the blue ocean view, the precarious peace I tried so hard to protect shattered in mere seconds. Sitting on the bed listening to the water running in the bathroom, my hands began to shake uncontrollably. There was nowhere left to hide, nowhere left to retreat. A moment later, when Sujin stepped out of the bathroom wearing a white robe, opening the door shyly, I realized it. The fact that this night, which should have been the most brilliant of my life, would be the start of its most horrific nightmare. Have you ever felt the sensation of your heartbeat pounding against your eardrums? That luxurious resort in Sokcho. Outside the window, the waves were crashing, but inside me, it was like a tsunami was raging. The secret I'd hidden my whole life was about to be exposed to the world, and worst of all, to my beloved wife, Maya. Sujin was breathtakingly beautiful as she stepped out of the shower, her fair skin peeking through the white robe, and her usual germophobic tidiness added an enigmatic sense of mystery. She approached the bed, head bowed, as if shy. "Sungho, you've been waiting a while, right? We're really husband and wife now." Her trembling voice pushed my guilt to its limit. With shaking hands, I dimmed the lights. I desperately hoped that my true form would look a little less intimidating. I slowly wrapped my arms around her shoulders and kissed her. Her body went rigid, but perhaps due to our marriage vows, she didn't push me away. But the problem started when I took off my clothes and my massive, repressed reality met her eyes. What is that?" Sujin's short scream tore through the silence of the room. She recoiled like a spring, backing into the corner of the bed as if she'd seen a viper. I panicked and tried to take her hand, but she violently shoved me away. "Don't come near me. Stay away." What was in her eyes wasn't shyness or excitement. It was the primal fear, no, the disgust of a human facing a beast. With trembling hands, she flipped the bed lamp back on. Under the harsh light, my abnormally huge member was laid bare. Sujin covered her mouth and began to retch. "My God, Sungho, are you even human? This is a monster. It's disgusting. It's just so repulsive." Monster. Those words pierced my heart like a dagger. I've been running away my whole life, and to think I'd eventually hear that from my own wife. I groveled at her feet, begging pitifully. "Sujin, I'm sorry. I was wrong not to tell you sooner, but I truly love you, If you just give it some time, it'll be okay." "Give it time? How can you say that? After seeing this, you can still say that? You didn't love me, you scammed me. Hiding something this hideous to marry me? Have you lost your mind?" Her voice grew sharper and sharper. To someone with mysophobia like her, my body was a filthy, terrifying contaminant, worse than any sewer. That night, she packed her bags, locked herself in the bathroom, and wouldn't come out. The resort room was dead silent, and I sat on the floor, naked and weeping tears of blood. I could hear my final sanctuary found at my age crumbling to pieces. The next morning, we didn't speak a word. On what should have been the honeymoon, we each took our bags and boarded a train to Seoul. Sujin sat as far away as possible, pressed against the window, as if even sitting near me made her skin crawl. Looking at her cold profile, I had a premonition that our marriage had already ended with her scream the night before. Back home, the hell continued. Sujin locked the bedroom door and banished me to the living room sofa. She shuddered whenever I got close and even separated the towels and cups I used. It was as if she were treating a contagious patient. Whenever my mother asked why we seemed so distant as newlyweds, I had to force a smile while choking back my misery. A marriage that began with love had turned into a bleak prison within days. Living under one roof we were total strangers. No, worse than strangers, we were objects of hatred. One night as the days withered away, I sat on the sofa, drinking straight soju, and wondering, is my life really over now? But my friends, in that pit of utter despair and unexpected connection came to me. A woman with a gaze completely opposite to the one my wife had, my sister-in-law, Heya Kruya. Kruayaka Wayaka. I didn't know it back then, that she would be the one to soothe the wounds caused by being called a monster by my wife. Friends, hell isn't some faraway place. Living under the same roof with a wife you married for love, being treated worse than a bug while enduring every day. That is a true living hell. Since that brutal first night in Sokcho, my life has been trapped in darkness, as if the pendulum of a clock had stopped dead. It's already been a year. They say this is when newlyweds should be head over heels in love, but the door to our bedroom has been locked tighter than a fortress against me. Do you know what it's like for a full-blooded man to live in his own home, cowering like a stray cat? Sujin now openly despises me. When I wake up and head to the living room, every time she passes the sofa where I slept, she wrinkles her nose and covers it with her sleeve, as if I smell like something is rotting on my body. Sangwoo, please wash the sofa pad more often. It feels like it's soaking up your stench. She says it calmly, but her eyes are sharp blades carving out my heart. Do you think that stench is really just dust sweat? Hardly. In her eyes, my very existence is nothing but filth and uncleanness. With her severe misophobia, she's even started wiping down the doorknobs I touch and the dining chairs I sit on with wet wipes. Every time I hear that pathetic scrubbing, my self-esteem crumbles into dust. My commute every night feels as heavy as a cow being led to the slaughterhouse. When I open the front door, instead of a welcoming smile, I'm met with icy silence and a "you are home." That's the only mechanical greeting I get. Dinner, you ask? It's been a long time since we started fending for ourselves. I scarf down rice and water in the corner of the sink, and Sujin won't even come out of the room until I vacate the kitchen. After 10 p.m., my only refuge is this worn-out leather sofa. I can hear Sujin turning pages of her Bible in the bedroom while I sit in the dark living room pouring myself shots of bitter soju. I stare at the light seeping through the gap in the bedroom door and wonder, why is crossing that one door so incredibly hard? What terrible sin did I commit to deserve this kind of punishment? Does being born a little larger than the average man mean I'm a monster destined to live a lifetime of atonement in the eyes of the woman I love? When the alcohol hits, my misery sometimes turns into rage. I want to jump up and pound on that bedroom door. I'm a man too. I'm your husband. I want to shout those words out loud. But as soon as I stand before that door, I collapse again. The scream I know I'd hear from the other side, "You're disgusting, you're disgusting. Stay away." That nightmare holds me back and chains my feet. In the end, I just slump back onto the sofa and down another bitter drink. My mother calls sometimes to nag me about when she'll see grandchildren, and I just beat my chest, offering a shameless lie that we're trying our best. How can a couple have a child when they haven't even properly held hands for over a year? The reflection in the mirror was nothing but a total loser. Just a hollow shell, with sunken eyes, slumped shoulders, and a heavy, bloated body. It was one Saturday afternoon, while my soul was withering away like that, I felt like I was suffocating at home, so I pulled on a hat and started walking down the back path of the apartment complex. As I walked along, staring blankly at my feet, I saw a woman huddled by the flower bed in the distance, letting out groans of pain. Oh dear, what do I do? It hurts so much. It was a familiar voice. I looked up and saw my sister-in-law, ㅅ란, sitting there, holding her ankle. I'd heard she was an aerobics or Pilates instructor, and there she was in her workout clothes, looking up at me in agony. I didn't know it back then, that this chance encounter would make my heart, which had been dead for a year, start beating again. Everyone, isn't life truly fickle? Just when one door slams shut, another window you never expected quietly creeps open. That day was no different. It was that Saturday afternoon when I fled the house to escape the coldness of my wife, who had locked the bedroom door. I was walking aimlessly behind the apartment complex when I saw a woman sitting by a flower bed, struggling. Oh my, what is going on? I got closer, and good heavens, it was my sister-in-law ㅅ란. I heard she ran a Pilates studio, and sure enough, she was dressed in tight leggings that showed off her figure. It was quite different from how I'd occasionally see her during the holidays. Her hair, slightly messy and damp with sweat, and her face, scrunched up in pain, had a strange, captivating allure. Sister-in-law, what are you doing here? Are you hurt? ㅅ란 looked up, startled by my voice. Even in her pain, she looked at me with clear signs of embarrassment. Oh, brother-in-law, what brings you here? I was out jogging, and I think I twisted my ankle. I can't seem to stand up. She clutched her ankle with trembling hands, and the area near her ankle was already swelling. Oh, red. This is a big problem. It's quite swollen. Let me take a look. Normally I would have been cautious, but she seemed so desperate that I knelt on one knee beside her. I carefully wrapped my hand around her slender ankle. At that moment, I instinctively flinched at the hot body heat of my sister-in-law radiating through my palm. Having not touched my wife even at the fingertips for over a year, the vivid warmth of a living person surged through my entire body like an electric shock. Ah, it hurts, brother-in-law. Her low, soft moan pierced my ears, and my heart began to pound uncontrollably. ㅅ란 was the complete opposite of my wife Sujin. If Sujin was like a cold block of ice, ㅅ란 was like a flame ready to ignite at any moment. Her body, toned by exercise, was full of elasticity, and as she wrapped her arms around my shoulders, her intense, unique scent paralyzed my senses. Pekka, Nika. Sister-in-law, this won't do. I'll take you home, Anjan. Hold on tight to my shoulders. I carefully helped her stand up. With my sturdy 6-foot frame, ㅅ란's body pressed closely against mine. Her soft breasts touched my arm, and with every limp her entire weight leaned onto me. Treated as a monster and useless by my wife, my massive frame felt like a reliable pillar for someone else, giving me a strange sense of pride. Brother-in-law, is it heavy? I'm so sorry. If Sujin knew, she'd be jealous. Her joking words made a corner of my heart ache. Jealous? Sujin wouldn't even care who I was carrying right now. In fact, she'd probably be relieved that I'm out of the house. I offered a bitter smile in reply and walked silently toward her apartment building. When we arrived at her door, Heren was practically burying her face in my shoulder. I unlocked the door and carefully laid her down on the living room sofa. Phew, we're here. Should I get you some medicine and an ice pack? Breathing heavily, Heren looked particularly provocative as she leaned back against the sofa. Her curves were starkly visible through her sweat-drenched, form-fitting workout clothes, tons und bouts. She looked up at me, gasping for air. But her gaze felt a little strange. It was too deep to be just from pain, filled with something desperate. Brother-in-law, you're just gonna leave? I'm thirsty. Could you get me a glass of water? And sit with me for a moment. I have something to tell you. Her low voice stopped me in my tracks. Ew. It wasn't the voice of my usually energetic sister-in-law, but a woman hiding a secret burden. As if bewitched, I sat at the edge of the sofa across from her. And at that moment I had no idea. I didn't know that the shocking confession about to leave her lips in this quiet living room would completely change the trajectory of my life. Everyone, do you believe that even the air has weight? Sitting in my sister-in-law Heren's living room, the air felt so heavy, it was suffocating. She took the glass of water I handed her, but she just fidgeted with it, without taking a single sip. In contrast to her toned physique as a Pilates instructor, a dark shadow hung over her face. After hesitating for a long while, she looked me straight in the eyes and opened her mouth. Brother-in-law, don't hide it. Do you realize you're walking around with "I'm unhappy" written all over your face? My heart sank in an instant. It felt like the mask I had worked so hard to keep from my wife Sujin had shattered like glass at that one sharp remark from my sister-in-law. Flustered, I averted my gaze and cleared my throat. No, sister-in-law, what are you talking about? I'm just tired because I've had a lot of work lately. But Heren wore a mysterious smile, as if she were mocking me, or perhaps pitying me. I know my sister Sujin better than anyone. She's been like that since she was little. I knew all along that with her mysophobia and her tendency to push people away like insects, if they didn't align with her beliefs, she was too cold a person for a man like you to handle. My hands trembled slightly at the mention of my wife's name and the expression "like insects" coming from her lips. The fact that someone was looking right through the hell I'd been living for the past year was unsettling, yet strangely, I felt a sense of relief in one corner of my heart. My sister-in-law sank deep into the sofa and let out a long sigh. Actually, I'm no different from you, brother-in-law. Even though I might look like a successful instructor on the outside, my insides are already rotting away. No one knows why I'm separated from my ex-husband. I told my family it was just differences in personality, but the real reason is something else entirely. She continued in a very low, raspy voice, as if she were unsealing a long-kept secret. He had a decent professional job and good manners, too. But once we got into bed, he couldn't perform as a man. He had a physical deficiency. He was so small and inadequate that I never once felt loved as a woman. I endured it for 5 years, but eventually I felt like a house pet rather than a woman. Her confession was shocking. I never imagined that my sister-in-law, who always seemed so confident and energetic, had such hidden pain. But what was even more surprising was how her situation was both so similar to mine, and yet the exact opposite. One is treated like a monster for being too big, and another is ignored for being too small. Is life really capable of playing such cruel jokes on us? Brother-in-law, I know better than anyone that feeling of being ignored as a man and the misery of being rejected. I also have a pretty good idea of how Sujin treats you. We really seem like two people cut from the same cloth. Tears welled up in Hyeran's eyes. Whether it was because of her injured ankle or the wounds in her heart, she approached me, her body trembling slightly. Her shoulders, exposed by her Pilates outfit, looked exceptionally frail. My heart, which had been sentenced to death as a man after being rejected by my wife, began to beat wildly, resonating with my sister-in-law's pain. Sister-in-law, I actually couldn't bring myself to speak, But seeing the look in her eyes, I felt the resentment I had suppressed for a year threatening to burst out. The humiliation I endured, my wife's cold screams, and those nights I rotted away on the sofa, I clenched my fists with my head bowed. Watching me, Hyeran suddenly reached out and placed her soft hand over my rough one while he moved. Brother-in-law, you don't have to force yourself to speak. I understand everything. Her touch was scorching hot. It was a handful of life's warmth incomparable to my wife, Sujin's ice-cold hands. As that heat spread from my arm through my entire body, Hyeran pressed her body closer to mine and whispered. She was so close that her breath touched my cheek. Oh, Sujin is such a fool to call a treasure right in front of her a monster. I've actually been curious about what that monster was like for a long time. Her eyes no longer held pity, but began to flash with repressed desire and curiosity. That provocative remark pulled tight the strings of my sanity. And then my sister-in-law placed her hand on my knee and made that fatal proposal that would shake my life to its core. Everyone, I doubted my own ears. Do you know what my sister-in-law just said to someone who has been called a monster his whole life? That she didn't recognize the treasure right in front of her? My heart was already thrashing like a broken engine. As Hyeran's hot touch lingered on my knee, the veins in my body, which had been frozen solid for a year, began to pulse all at once. In a trembling voice, I poured out the miserable confession that had weighed me down my entire life. Sister-in-law, the reason Sujin rejects me is that my body is just too big compared to others. On our wedding night, she screamed that I was a monster and that I was repulsive. Since then, I've become less than a bug in this house. I bowed my head and shuddered with shame. Now my sister-in-law will despise me too. Once she knows the truth, she'll run away. As I thought that and gasped for air, I suddenly felt a hand gently lifting my chin. It was Hyeran. Her eyes were not filled with horror, but rather with a burning heat and deep longing. A monster, you say? Did Sujin really say that? She leaned in until her face was right in front of mine and whispered lowly. The scent of her strong perfume mixed with the faint smell of sweat from her workout, shaking my reason. Brother-in-law, no, Sungho, I told you earlier, didn't I? That my ex-husband was so small, he let me wither away. I was dying to be loved as a woman, my insides were drying up like a desert, but that man couldn't do a thing for me. Her hand slowly swept down my chest and dug deep toward my thighs. I was startled and tried to grab her wrist, but her gaze pinned me in place, unable to move. To a woman as parched as I am, a man like you isn't a monster, you are a savior. Sujin is just saying that because she's spoiled. She's a fool who doesn't even know what a great blessing she has, she said, as she slowly shifted her body onto my lap. The firm and heavy weight of her body, toned from Pilates, was transmitted directly to me. Just how incredible is it anyway? You said you've never even had a proper experience with a woman in your life, right? Doesn't it feel unfair? I just feel so bad for you letting such a precious thing go to waste. Sister-in-law, you shouldn't do this. We are family after all. If Sujin finds out, my last shred of reason screamed, but Heran placed a finger on my lips to stop me. Has Sujin ever even treated you like a husband? She has already abandoned you. But I'm different. I need you so desperately at this moment. You're the only one who can bring rain to my desert-like heart. She wrapped her arms around my neck and breathed hot air against my ear. Sungo, trust me. I'll prove to you myself that you're no monster and that you're the greatest man in this world. Her hand stopped near the buckle of my pants. A gesture of intense acceptance I had never felt even once in my 42 years. May I see for myself just how big it is. At that provocative temptation, the walls inside me crumbled down. My massive desire, which had been pointed at and called abnormal my whole life, was finally preparing to declare liberation before her hungry gaze. I couldn't push her away any longer. Or rather, I didn't want to. The only woman who called me a savior. As if possessed, I wrapped my arms around her waist. And even up until that moment, I couldn't have imagined what ecstasy and ruin that secret ritual in her room would bring to my life simultaneously. Everyone, I am trembling. For all those long years, my body was a source of shame to me and fear to others. But what about my sister-in-law right in front of me now? Now, far from showing contempt, she was looking at me with an entranced gaze like someone who had discovered a treasure she'd waited her whole life for. The moment Haran's soft touch pushed my trousers aside and my massive reality was finally revealed to the air, I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing myself. She'll scream again. She'll call me a monster and spit on me again. But what I heard wasn't a scream but a hot gasp filled with deep admiration. My God, Sungho, this is truly marvelous. I take back what I said about Sujin being a fool. She's just insane. How could anyone look at this and call it a monster? Haran did not run away. Instead, with trembling hands, she carefully embraced my massive presence, as if soothing my wounded pride. In that moment, a tremor ran through my entire body. The overwhelming feeling of being completely accepted by someone, something I had never felt even once in 42 years. Her touch was hot, and that warmth melted away the icy block of inferiority that had been layered deep within my heart in an instant. Sungho, look at me. Don't be afraid, she whispered when I opened my eyes. Heran was already stripping off her clothes one by one. Her vibrant bronze skin and voluptuous curves fit for a Pilates instructor filled my vision. She wrapped her arms around my neck and led me to the bed. If my wife Sujin's bedroom was an icy prison, my sister-in-law bedroom was like a blazing furnace. We tangled our bodies together as if savoring one another. I tensed up once more as my massive self burrowed into her body. What if she said it hurt, or what if she pushed me away in fear? Instead, ㅅ한 hugged my back tightly and shook her hips as if craving something deeper. The moan flowing from her lips was not one of pain, but the sound of ecstasy as a woman's thirst dried up for over 3 years was finally quenched. Sung-ho, it's so good. I finally feel like a real woman. You are not a monster. You are the God who brings me to life. With those words, I felt as if my soul had been saved. The fact that my physical trait, which I had thought a lifelong curse, could be the greatest gift and blessing in this woman's life. For the first time since I was born, I felt my worth as a man. I was tearfully grateful that I could make someone this happy, and that I too could be so perfectly welcomed in someone's arms. That night, for the first time in 42 years, I spent a true wedding night. ㅅ한 willingly opened herself up and accepted me, reaching depths I had never once touched with Sujin. Forgetting the world's morality and the constraints of family, we focused solely on the heat radiating from our bodies. In her arms, I was no longer the downtrodden, aging bachelor Park Seong-ho. I was a man worthy of the most confident and immense love in the world. Afterward, as we lay languidly, ㅅ한 buried her face in my chest and spoke. Seong-ho, what do we do now? I don't think I can go back to how things were without you. Her voice was already thick with obsession and love for me. I felt exactly the same. To me, having been treated coldly for a year, this warm embrace was a temptation more potent than any drug. But they say happiness often comes with a poison, don't they? The thrilling sense of self-worth I felt in my sister-in-law's arms soon led me down a terrifying path of a double life. It was a vile yet sweet betrayal, bowing my head submissively to my wife while picturing my sister-in-law's hot body in my mind. I had crossed a river from which there was no turning back. My hands trembled slightly as I dressed to go home, but a sly smile spread across my lips without me even realizing it. I'll come again tomorrow, sister-in-law. With that one phrase, the prelude to the most dangerous and magnificent affair of my life began. Everyone, the saying that people lose their minds once they get a taste of something, was exactly my situation. 2. Having lived my whole life with my head bowed like a sinner, was I supposed to be sane after being treated like a king in my sister-in-law's arms? Since that day, my mind has been completely filled with ㅅ한's hot breath and her supple, resilient body. My wife Sujin's cold bedroom door no longer scares me. Rather, that the door remains tightly locked has become an opportunity for me to be with her. Sujin, we have a big event at the center today, so I think I'll be late. Go ahead and eat dinner first. This is the pathetic lie I toss out as I step out the front door. In the past, my lips would have trembled with pangs of conscience, but now I've become quite the sly fox. Sujin just turned to the page of her book without even looking up and replied dryly, "Yes, all right. Make sure you lock the door behind you." I was so grateful for her indifference. To her, I was still just a big houseguard dog, and taking advantage of her carelessness, I stepped on the gas toward my sister-in-law's house. 3, sometimes 4 times a week. My real destination after work wasn't our home, but my sister-in-law's apartment. To my wife, it was working overtime, an urgent inspection. I even used excuses like a business trip to the provinces to buy myself time. Every time I entered the door code to my sister-in-law's house, a mix of heart-pounding fear and pleasure washed over me. When the door opened, the scent of fine wine would hit me, and there was Heran waiting in a daring slip that showed off her Pilates instructor physique. Brother-in-law, no, Sung-ho, why are you just getting here now? Do you have any idea how long I've been waiting? She would wrap her arms around my neck and devour my body as if she was starving. We tangled together like madmen on the living room sofa, the kitchen table, and finally on her wide bed. The body that was a repulsive monster to Sujin became an omnipotent God's tool here, carrying Heran off to heaven. Every time I heard the passionate moans erupting from her lips, I felt alive. No, I felt with every fiber of my being that I was the strongest man in the world. Isn't it funny? On one side they spit at me and call me filthy, while on the other they cling to me begging for just one more time. In that extreme disparity, I even felt a strange sense of superiority. Sujin, do you even know how this body you discarded as a monster drives your own sister crazy? This twisted sense of revenge drowned out all my guilt. Sometimes, though, guilt would suddenly creep in. While lying there drenched in sweat with my sister-in-law, my heart would sink whenever I caught a glimpse of that childhood photo of Sujin and Heran sitting in the living room. But as soon as Heran's smooth legs wrapped around my waist, those thoughts would vanish like mist. She whispered into my ear, "Sung-ho, can't we just live like this forever? Sujin will never understand your true value. Only I can make you whole, hey." Our double life grew bolder with each passing day. I'd lied to Sujin about company workshops to take romantic getaways, with Haran to pension houses, and we even used hotel day-use rooms while my wife was teaching at school. As the tension grew, the pleasure multiplied, and I staked my entire soul on this dangerous gamble. But you know, a tail that grows too long is bound to be stepped on, and the heavier a secret is, the faster it sinks to the bottom. I believed I was a perfect actor. I was arrogant enough to think Sujin was too oblivious to ever find out. But one night, after a stormy session at Haran's, I crept back home just before dawn. The living room, which was usually dark, had the lights on. And there was Sujin, sitting on the sofa in her pajamas, staring right through me. The chilling aura behind her expressionless face sent cold sweat running down my spine. "Oh, Sujin, why are you sitting up? Why are you out here?" Instead of answering my question, she stared quietly at my collar. Her gaze was fixed on a single strand of my sister-in-law's hair that I had failed to brush off. And ever since that day, my wife Sujin's attitude began to change in strange ways. A look of suspicion, something deeper and darker than mere disgust, began to bind me. You know, people who commit sins usually become even bolder. As Seoul started to feel small, I began to look much further away. I have a Center Union workshop in Gyeongju this weekend, so I think I'll be gone for 2 days. Lies flowed from my mouth as smoothly as a well-oiled machine. My wife Sujin just nodded indifferently as usual. That dry, emotionless reaction felt like a complete absolution to me. But that day, the person in the passenger seat wasn't my wife, but my sister-in-law, Hae-ran. As we rolled down the windows and drove to Gyeongju, in the cool breeze, my heart felt like it would burst with liberation. A thrill of freedom I hadn't felt in 42 years. Wearing sunglasses and thick red lipstick, my sister-in-law gently stroked the back of my hand. Seong-ho, don't think about anything else tonight. It's only the two of us. A quiet Hanok pension in Gyeongju. Moonlight poured over the low stone walls, and the yard was filled with the sound of insects. Yet, in contrast to the peaceful scene, a storm of heat raged inside the room. Hae-ran wanted my body even more obsessively than usual. To her, my presence was a treasure, more awe-inspiring and valuable than any relic in this ancient city. Aha, Seong-ho, you really are the best. If Soo-jin knew this taste, would she have ever let you go? Every time her provocative laughter echoed in the room, I was intoxicated by a strange sense of victory. The paradoxical pleasure of having the wound of being rejected by my wife healed in my sister-in-law's arms. We indulged in each other's bodies as if the world were coming to an end. That night, I fell into the illusion that I was the center of the world. Drunk on the potent liquor of an affair, I failed to see the shadow of impending ruin. But everyone, while I was lost in ecstasy with my sister-in-law in Gyeongju, something entirely different was happening in Seoul. I never dreamed that my wife Soo-jin, whom I thought was so foolish, was actually a much colder and more meticulous woman than I expected. Soo-jin already knew. The strange hair I had brought back on my collar, the unidentified scent of perfume on my body. And, decisively, every time I worked late and left the house, my car's dashcam memory card would disappear or be formatted. With her fastidious personality, she had decided to handle my betrayal in a neat and perfect way as well. Yes, manager, they say. They've headed down to Gyeongju now. Please make sure to secure every single photo and video without missing any. In particular, those shameless acts of theirs must be exposed in vivid detail. Soo-jin had already paid a large sum to a private investigator to track my every move. As we held hands and laughed in a quiet cafe in Gyeongju, as we whispered to each other behind the curtains of a Hanok guest house, the camera shutter was clicking endlessly in the dark. The images of me and my sister-in-law, seen through a telephoto lens, were instantly turned into digital files and sent to Soo-jin's phone. I didn't know anything, and the next morning I planned our return to Seoul, happily buying hwangnam bread with haran. Shall we go to Jeju Island next time? At my words, Hae-ran seemed happy and leaned her head on my shoulder. If I had known that even that moment was being captured by a cold lens, would I have been able to smile like that? Until I saw Soo-jin's face upon arriving in Seoul, I was intoxicated by my own perfect acting. I'm tired. The workshop was harder than I thought. To my shameless words, Soo-jin replied with a mechanical smile. Is that so? You worked hard, Seong-ho. But how was the weather in Gyeongju? I heard the Hanok guest house there is quite beautiful. At that moment, icy goosebumps rose all over my back. Gyeongju. I had never told her I was going to Gyeongju. As I stammered in panic, Soo-jin slowly set her phone down in front of me. On the screen was a vivid image of my back as I wrapped my arm around my sister-in-law's waist and entered the guest house last night. Oh. There was nowhere left to run. Sujin's eyes were flashing with a cruel desire for revenge that went beyond mere disgust. And she was ready to play her final card, one I hadn't even imagined, to completely destroy our entire family. Everyone, have you ever heard the sound of a life collapsing? Huh? It's not the sound of a grand building being demolished. In a very quiet living room. The light sound of the phone my wife held out hitting the table. That sound reduced my 42 years of life to dust. That sweet 2-day trip to Gyeongju had come back as poison. Seongho, was that Gyeongju Hwangnam bread that delicious? I'm sure it was even sweeter because you ate it with my sister. Sujin's voice was chillingly calm. It wasn't her usual bland and emotionless tone of voice. When I picked up the phone with trembling hands, hell unfolded before my eyes. The sight of me wrapping my arms around Haeran's waist and kissing her in front of the pension. The sight of us laughing while feeding each other lettuce wraps at a restaurant. Even the graphic, explicit images taken through a window crack, every single photo drove a stake through my heart. Sujin, this is... Wait, just hear me out, I pleaded, pitifully. The excuses coming out of my mouth were more repulsive than trash rotting in a dumpster. But Sujin cut me off and gave a cruel laugh. No need to listen. I've already seen it all. Oh, and I invited some guests over today. Your family, Xiangwu, the people you love so dearly. At that moment, the doorbell rang sharply through the house. The moment the door opened and I saw who was walking in, I collapsed to the floor. My mother and my in-laws. Even Haeran's estranged husband, who had come running after hearing the news. Sujin was the perfect director of this hellish play. Mother, you are here? In-laws, please take a seat. I invited you all today because there is a very momentous event in our family. I never dreamed that my husband and my sister, whom I trusted most in the world, were this close. Sujin connected her phone to the large TV in the living room. The scene of that filthy affair filled the entire wall. My mother shrieked and clutched her chest, and my father-in-law collapsed, grabbing the back of his neck. The house instantly turned into a scene of chaos. Haeran was sobbing in the corner with her face covered, and I just stared blankly at the floor. You monster, are you even human? How dare you do this with your sister-in-law? My mother-in-law's fury erupted, and sharp fingernail marks were left on my cheek. But what I was truly afraid of wasn't the physical beating. It was the look in Sujin's eyes. Like an audience member watching this chaos, she was sitting elegantly on the sofa, enjoying our destruction. To her, this exposure was more than just simple revenge. It was a cleanup operation to simultaneously remove the monster of a husband who defiled her and the sister who broke her perfect order. Well, you've all seen it now, haven't you? How these filthy people have insulted our family. Sujin pulled divorce papers she had prepared in advance from her bag and threw them in my face. Surrender all of your assets as alimony. And mother, please take this monster of a son and get out of my house immediately. I can't stand to be here for even another second because it makes my skin crawl. My mother grabbed me by the collar and wailed in grief. Xiangho, you useless fool, you'd be better off dead. Just die. Those words from my mother, who had pushed for this marriage as her lifelong wish, felt like a final gunshot to my soul, my soul. Haran was dragged away by her husband, leaving me behind, in the empty living room, stripped bare like a piece of discarded luggage. There was no other way to describe it than utter ruin. The price for making me feel like a man for the first time in 42 years was far too cruel. That night, leaving behind the sound of my mother's wailing and resentment, I wandered aimlessly into the streets. Money, honor, family. I had absolutely nothing left. But tell me, when a person hits rock bottom, do they actually become more ruthless? At that hellish scene of exposure, I caught a glimpse of another truth hidden deep in Sujin's eyes. The chilling intuition that she wasn't just acting out of anger as a victim, but had set this stage for some other purpose. As I wandered the streets, my phone vibrated. The caller was Hiron, the final choice facing two people who had lost everything. I answered the phone with trembling hands. And the one word I heard from my sister-in-law on the other end thrust my life once again into an unexpected whirlwind of relationships. You know, they say when a person hits the absolute bottom, they lose all fear, dual fear. That turned out to be true. Even as my father-in-law's shoe struck my solar plexus and my mother-in-law's sharp nails clawed at my cheeks, making blood stream down, I strangely felt no pain. Actually, it made me snap to my senses. My mother's sobbing could be heard behind me, struggling for breath, but my eyes were fixed only on one place. Herilun, trembling, in the corner. Illalal, balalal, illabahalalam, in the corner. You beast of a man! How dare you toy with my daughters, eh? I'm gonna kill you, you monster! My father-in-law's thunderous roar shook the ceiling of the living room. Even amidst that chaos, Sujin stood with her arms crossed, wearing a cynical smile like an audience member watching the end of a play. That's right. I was a monster. In her eyes, I must have been disgusting filth from beginning to end. But there was exactly one person who called that filth a jewel. It was Haran crying right there. I spat blood onto the floor and slowly pulled myself up. Defying everyone's expectation that I would kneel and beg, I straightened my back and looked my father-in-law straight in the eyes. My mother grabbed my sleeve, weeping and begging me to apologize and say I was wrong, but I gently brushed her hand away. I didn't want to hide like a coward anymore. Father-in-law, have you hit mother-in-law enough? Then it's my turn to speak now. My voice did not tremble. In fact, it was the most confident and clear sound I'd made in my 42 years of life. That's right. I slept with my sister-in-law. We indulged in each other madly, both in Gyeongju and at her home. But why is that my fault? No, is it only my fault? Sujin's eyebrows twitched at my provocative words. Pointing at her, I poured out all the bitterness pent up in my heart. Sujin, have you ever treated me as your husband even once? Who called me a monster and spat at my body on our wedding night, and who treated me like a bug for a whole year, forcing me to the sofa? When your germophobic brand of virtue was killing me, it was Haran who saved me. The living room went as quiet as if cold water had been thrown over it. I walked over to Haran, who couldn't lift her head in the corner. And right in front of the family, I firmly held her trembling hand. I won't make any cowardly excuses. I don't care if people spit on me or point fingers. Oh. In all my life, Hiran is the only woman who has fully loved me, Park Jung-ho, with this massive body of mine, as a human being and as a man. She is the only love of my life, the one who pulled me out of that prison you call morality. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? Calling my sister-in-law the only love of my life. But at that moment, it was my truth. Because to me, Haran's hot moans were more like a sacred gospel than Sujin's cold, sharp words. Haran looked up at me with tear-filled eyes. In her eyes, instead of fear, there was a final trust toward the man who had thrown everything away for her. My mother slumped to the floor, laughing as if she'd lost her mind, and my mother-in-law collapsed onto the sofa as if she'd fainted. The household was in absolute irreparable ruins. Sujin managed to spit out one word with trembling lips. You two are truly insane. Get out to hell. Yes, we'll go to hell. Because it'll be much warmer there than in this house where an ice witch like you lives. I took Heron's hand and walked out of that hellish house. The curses and wailing coming from behind us now felt as distant as the sound of waves far away. We didn't even take the elevator, we ran down the stairs. Now we had no home to return to, no family to call upon, and no honor left. There was only the scent of each other's sweat on our skin, and that intense sense of liberation from being abandoned by the world. As I got into the car and turned the engine on, my hands were trembling with ecstasy. The belated rebellion of a 42-year-old bachelor was thus completed with the downfall of the family. But everyone running away didn't mean it was the end. The world wouldn't leave us alone, and there was only one path left for the two of us, cornered at a dead end. And we fled Seoul under the cover of night. We had no destination, just somewhere beyond the world's gaze, where we could build a physical paradise for just the two of us. However, at the end of that road, we were met with an unexpected, final struggle unleashed by my sister-in-law's husband. Everyone being empty-handed at the age of 42 is a truly strange feeling, more than you'd think. The moment I stamped the divorce papers, not a single fingertip of mine trembled. Sujin, with her snake-like eyes, demanded everything I had sweated and bled for, my entire fortune, the apartment I lived in, and even my severance pay. This is the bare minimum price for the insult you've brought upon our family. There wasn't a shred of mercy in her cold voice. I signed the papers without a word. What use were a mere apartment and a few bank accounts? If I could just tear off the label of monster that had bound me for 42 years and go to the woman who accepted me for who I am, I would have given up my own organs. I stamped the mutual divorce agreement firmly, agreeing to hand over all property rights. On the way out of the courthouse, all I had left in my pocket was an old wallet and my car keys. Yenho, you've truly lost your mind. Giving away all that precious house and money, what are you going to do now? Do you think that woman is going to feed you for the rest of your life? My mother, who had followed me to the courthouse, beat my back and wailed. She, who said her lifelong wish was to see her son married, was now screaming that I had disgraced the family and become a pauper. I quietly pulled her hands away. Mother, I'm sorry. But I can finally breathe now. I am not a monster. I am just a man who also wants to be loved. At my words, Mother sat down as if dazed and I headed to the parking lot without looking back. Haran was waiting for me there. She, too, had been kicked out of her shattered home, having only managed to pack a couple of suitcases. The glamorous Pilates instructor Lee Heron was gone. There was only a wounded, hungry woman left, whose eyes burned with longing just for me. We crammed our bags into the back seat of my old SUV. We had nowhere to go and no set destination. But my hands gripping the steering wheel were firmer than they had ever been. Heron, I'm a real beggar now? No. I have nothing but this uselessly large body of mine. Are you sure you're okay with that? At my self-deprecating joke, Haran hugged my arm tightly and buried her face in my chest. Don't say such foolish things. To me, that is the most precious treasure in the world. Let's go anywhere. To a place without Sujin, family, or those stifling moral books. The moment her breath touched me, the car was instantly filled with a scorching heat. On the Riverside Expressway leaving Seoul, we gripped each other's hands as if there were no tomorrow. New tomorrow. Social status, family honor. Tell them all to go to hell. For the first time in 42 years, I've discovered the man I am. So what do those empty shells matter? We wandered from one rundown motel to another in the outskirts of Gyeonggi-do, devouring each other's flesh every night. As our money dwindled, our bodies collided even more intensely. Haran accepted my massive presence and would collapse into my arms each time, and looking at her, I found the reason I was born into this world for the first time. This cursed body of mine was prepared solely for this woman. But there was no way the world would let us go so easily. Just as we were about to settle down in a cheap rented room, an unexpected shadow was stalking us. Haran's husband. That man, who was my brother and blinded by rage, had begun to hunt us down. Seong-ho, do you think someone is following us? Haran, pale as a sheet, looked at the rearview mirror and trembled like an aspen tree. I looked back to see a black sedan frantically closing the distance. In the eyes of a man who had lived his whole life steeped in inferiority, we must have been enemies who had to be torn to shreds. My hands were drenched in sweat as I gripped the wheel while racing through narrow alleyways. I couldn't let this precious paradise we had just found be taken away. But that man's persistent pursuit was slowly driving us to the edge of a cliff. And finally, near an isolated abandoned house, that black sedan blocked our path. The moment the car door opened and I saw the man with eyes full of madness stepping out, holding something gleaming, I knew. The price of this love would not be settled with mere wealth or honor. From this point on, a brutal struggle for our very lives was about to begin. Everyone, we have finally reached this point. The frenzied threats wielded by Haran's ex-husband, Sujin's sharp-edged curses, and the world, vulgar finger-pointing toward us, all sound like the distant murmurs of a river now. I am currently sitting across from Haran in a tiny, dilapidated apartment on the outskirts of Seoul, a cramped space with a meager deposit. What would the world call us? Us? A shameless man having an affair with his sister-in-law, a harlot who seduced her brother-in-law and ruined the family. Yes, exactly. That is all true. I will not deny it. We are failures who abandoned our family's expectations and tore down the walls of what society calls morality to run away. But look at Haran, humming as she bubbles a stew right before my eyes. How could I possibly bow my head to the world's judgmental stares when I have this woman who never calls my body a monster but treats it as a divine gift and holds me passionately every single night of my 42 years? When night falls, this old apartment becomes our sanctuary. It is filled with a vitality I never felt in the respectable apartment I once lived in with my wife Sujin. Haren embraces my massive frame with her firm palati, toned body, May. We understand each other's lack. A woman who was lonely because she was too small, and a man who was alienated because he was too large. The explosive ecstasy created by our incredible union is like a midlife festival that no one who hasn't experienced it could ever understand. Seong-ho, people say we'll be unhappy soon. But what can we do? I am so happy that I would have no regrets even if I died right now. With beads of sweat on her skin, Hye-ran rests her ear against my chest and whispers this. And I brush her wet hair aside and answer. If we have to go to hell, let's go together. Because even there, if I'm with you, it will be heaven. At 42, a bit late in life, I finally became a real man and learned what real love is. Although my bank account is empty and my future is uncertain, at least I am no longer an empty shell dying alone on a couch with a glass of liquor. Tell me, how is your bedroom doing? Are you perhaps forcing yourself to hold on to a relationship that looks perfect and noble on the outside, but has turned ice cold on the inside? I mean, are you throwing your precious instincts and happiness into the trash just because they don't fit the mold society has set for you? I, Park Seong-ho, can now say this with confidence. That even if others call me a monster, it is enough if I can be the only salvation for the person I love. Has our tragic yet passionate story caused a small ripple in your heart, I believe it must have brought anger to some and a strange sense of liberation to others. Well, that is all the story I have prepared for today. If you found this provocative love story written by a 42-year-old bachelor and his sister-in-law interesting, please don't forget to click subscribe, like, and turn on notifications. Your single click becomes the great strength that drives the next story of this giant man. And what are your thoughts on this? You can curse me for doing something so outrageous, or you can cheer me on, saying it's for the best. Please leave your passionate reactions in the comment section. I will read every single one and engage with you. You only live once. Don't worry about what others think, and pursue the love you truly want to. I will return next time with an even more unconventional and heartfelt true story. This has been Park Sang-woo. Thank you for watching.